Hello, and welcome to Sunday School. My name is Nicholas Athanasu, and I am the high school boys teacher at the parish of St. Spiridon at Kingsford. When we think of heroes, we might think of athletes or actors or someone who's accomplished a lot in their profession and made a lot of money. It's very rare for us to regard someone as a hero who gave their wealth and all of their possessions to the poor. Many people would call such a person a fool rather than a hero. But the early Christians lived a new heroic life, following the path of the person that gave that wealth and all of their possessions to the poor. They offered everything to everyone and had many of their own possessions in common. Scene 1. We're in Jerusalem, a few months after Christ's sacrifice on Golgotha and his resurrection. The scene is described by St. Luke the Evangelist in the Acts of the Apostles at chapter 4, verses 32 to 35. The multitude of the faithful had one heart and one soul, and no one would say, "This is mine," but they had everything in common. With great power, the apostles preached the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, and all the faithful abounded in the grace of God upon them. There was no one among them who lacked anything, for those who owned the fields or houses sold them and deposited their money at the apostles' feet, and the money was distributed to everyone according to their need. This is revolutionary. We see here a society of true equality and true love being created. There were no poor and no rich. During the years of Christian persecution, this genuine love was a key feature of the Christian faith. To be a Christian meant you loved in this way. Scene 2 takes us to Carthage during the middle of the 3rd century. Saint Cyprianos decides to divide his wealth among the poor. Many other wealthy young people follow suit. Do you remember the names of some of the other saints who did the same? Some, such as Saint Nicolaus, Saint Panteleimon, Saint Agni, Saint Basil the Great, and many others since. The love of the early Christians knew no boundaries. There was solidarity between the Christians of the various distant cities. They felt that they belonged to one church, even though they're in different cities and different countries. And as much as they could, they sent help where needed to those other cities, to those other Christians. Scene 3 takes us to Alexandria during the middle of the 3rd century, where, much like our time, there was an epidemic. The Christians in Alexandria displayed true acts of love in this time. They visited sick people, both related and unrelated to them. They would care for them. They didn't care about their own health, their own safety. They knew the risks associated with helping sick, contagious people and knowingly accepted them. They knew that they could catch a deadly disease without any of the protections or medicines that we have. They had no masks, no vaccines, no personal protective equipment, no hospitals in those days. And that was why the Christians went and helped. When all of the pagans and all of the doctors ran away to the countryside, the Christians stayed in the city and helped those who were sick and suffering. That is an act of heroism. And with such heroic acts, Christianity overcame the resistance of the pagan world. Do you think that this resistance, that this revolution that Christ preached 2,000 years ago has ended today? No, it hasn't. Christians today are called upon to fight for the ideals of true love. So what are we supposed to do here in Sydney in the year 2020? We're not meant to just talk about love. We're meant to actually live it. Our own example has to inspire others to love. Sort of like the following example, where a blind girl once wrote letters to unknown people, random strangers, asking them to give any clothes they had to poor children. And people responded to this girl's request, and many poor children were clothed simply because of this girl's gesture. The poor children were very moved by her act of love, and they responded by sending her a thank you letter, along with a little chamomile flower they picked from the fields. The girl was very moved by their gift, but she didn't keep that gift to herself. she passed it along to some elderly people in a nursing home. And they, in turn, after they found out how the girl received the chamomile, decided to help poor children from another area. In this way, the chain of love progressed. In this way, our acts of love can progress and generate more acts of love. But unfortunately, many people love to praise love, but they don't practice it. They prefer to allow others to do the loving, and maybe then, when it suits them, they might consider following. Sometimes they try and justify their hard-heartedness by saying, theories about love are good, but let's be realistic. Or, be careful not to be naive. Or, look out for yourself first. Everyone for himself. Me first. Do you think that's right? Do you think that being loving is just being naive, just being foolish? On the contrary, love is a feature of a big heart and strong character. Love takes bravery. Think about it. What takes more courage? To eat a whole chocolate bar to yourself, or to save half and share it with your younger sibling or your older sibling? What takes more love? To respond in anger to a classmate that teased you, or to remain silent and forgive him? That last option is far braver. People of love have an honorary place in the conscience of the Church. People such as Saint Basil the Great, Saint John the Merciful, Saint Porphyrios, and so many others. They show us what Saint John the Evangelist said, that God is love, through their lives. When we talk about love, our minds often go to charity or almsgiving, and that's good. But what do you think love is? Love is bigger, love is wider than just that. Listen to what the Apostle Paul says about love in his first letter to the Corinthians at chapter 13, verses 4 to 8. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. You see, love does not seek its own self-interest. It does not think evil. It covers the shortcomings of its neighbor. It's the same when you keep quiet about when an injustice is done to you by your brother or your sister or your classmate. When you don't boast about your successes, and when you don't envy others for their own successes. That's showing love. But you don't have to wait for something to come your way to show your love. You have to seek opportunities to exercise love. Just like when you're thirsty, you go to the tap and you seek water. That's how we need to be with love. And we need the grace of our good God so that we can truly love. We need to ask our Lord with all of the fervour of our hearts to teach us his love, to give us the strength to apply it daily in our lives. If we learn to see the image of Christ in every person's face, in all of our neighbours, it will help us to love. By loving God, we can love our neighbours.